Okay, so you know how everyone always talks about space, like the final frontier?
Yeah.
Well, today we're going deep on how it's not just about astronauts and rockets anymore.
It's so much bigger.
Right. It's actually like this, I don't know, surprisingly huge part of the global economy now.
Completely intertwined. It's kind of wild when you stop and think about it.
It is. And we've got this super interesting article. It was actually co-written by like an actual space industry expert, someone who's
Yeah.
really in the thick of it,
Wow.
and a global economy analyst.
Interesting combo.
Totally. And they basically go deep on this question. How are things like, global economics, especially stuff like US tariffs, how are those things actually shaping the whole future of space exploration and like how we use space in general?
That's a huge question.
Right. So that's our mission for this deep dive. You ready?
I'm strapped in.
Okay, good. Because right off the bat, they talk about this big shift in the space sector, going from mostly government-run stuff.
Yeah, like NASA and all that.
Exactly. To this new era. They call it like new space, which is
Mhm.
all about commercial companies, like private companies leading the charge.
Oh, yeah. I've heard that term thrown around in new space.
Mm.
So what does it actually mean in practice?
So it's basically, think SpaceX, Blue Origin, all those companies.
All right.
They're like driving so much of the innovation and investment now. It's less about national pride and more about like businesses seeing this huge opportunity in space.
Okay, so less about planting flags and more about building businesses in space.
Exactly. And what's super fascinating is they argue that this has created this, they call it like an economic ecosystem beyond borders.
Beyond borders. I like that.
Right. It's such a good way to put it because, it's not just one country doing its own thing anymore.
More like a global collaboration.
Exactly. Like, picture this. You have a satellite designed in, let's say, Silicon Valley, right?
Okay.
But the super efficient solar panels powering it, they're made in Germany.
Oh, wow.
Then the whole thing gets launched on a rocket from India. And all of that, it's sending data to, like, farmers in Africa or, tracking shipping routes in Southeast Asia. It's truly global.
Wow, so this whole interconnectedness is actually essential to how the space sector works.
Totally. And the article really drives home the point that all of this is super dependent on a stable global economy.
Okay, so why is that so important for space, specifically?
So think about it. These space ventures, right? They're
Yeah.
like long-term things,
Definitely. Tons of upfront investment.
tons. And like you often don't see a return for years.
Right, takes a while to build and launch. And
Absolutely. So if the global economy is all over the
yeah,
place,
like huge inflation, markets going crazy.
exactly, who's going to want to invest in space then? They
Yeah.
need things to be like predictable.
Makes sense. You need to know your money's going to be worth something down the line.
Totally. So they need low inflation, stable, stock markets and exchange rates.
The whole enchilada.
Right. That stability makes those long-term investments in space way more appealing.
And the article also mentioned something about access to financing, right?
Oh, yeah. That's crucial because you know how a lot of these new space startups get going?
Venture capital. Angel investors.
That's it. And those guys, they invest when the economy is doing well.
When interest rates are low, they're more willing to take risks.
Exactly. It's like, hey, the economy's booming. Let's throw some cash at this space startup. It might be the next big thing.
To the moon.
Literally. But then when the economy dips,
Yeah, everyone gets skittish.
they pull back, and the space sector is often seen as like a luxury.
Right. It's like,
Yeah.
we need to focus on essentials, not sending stuff to space.
Sadly, yeah. But it's not just about the money coming in, it's also the demand driving it.
Oh, like the actual need for the stuff space can provide.
Bingo. Think about it.
Yeah.
The world is becoming more and more digital, right?
For sure. Our phones are basically extensions of ourselves now.
And all that data, all those connections, they rely on space.
Oh, right, like GPS satellites?
Totally. And like high-resolution images from space are used for everything.
I guess I never really thought about it. What kind of things?
Oh man, like precision agriculture, so farmers can see which parts of their fields need more water,
Interesting.
or monitoring the environment, like tracking deforestation.
Wow, so space is actually helping us take better care of the planet.
It is. And of course, global internet access. That's huge. Lots of remote places rely on satellites for internet.
Right, so this demand for data and connectivity is basically the engine driving the space industry.
Big time. But then the article takes this turn and it gets into something really interesting, the impact of U.S. tariffs.
Ah, okay, so now we're getting into the political side of things.
Kinda, yeah. Because the US, obviously, is a major player in the space game,
For sure.
but they've been putting tariffs on certain tech components.
What kind of components are we talking about?
Things that are vital for space,
Oh,
semiconductors.
wow, the brains of all the electronics.
Exactly. Specialized solar cells that can, handle the harshness of space.
Oh, okay.
And rare earth metals, which are, essential for propulsion systems and sensors.
And I'm guessing these tariffs are aimed at specific countries.
You got it. Places like China, who the U.S. sees as a.
A strategic rival.
Exactly.
And what's the reasoning behind these tariffs?
The official line is usually about national security and boosting domestic manufacturing, right?
Right, bringing jobs back home, that kind of thing.
That's the idea. But the article, it lays out this argument that these tariffs, they actually end up hurting the space sector.
Hmm. How so?
Well, the most immediate thing is cost, right?
Okay, yeah, tariffs make things more expensive.
And remember those global supply chains we were talking about?
Oh, yeah, so those tariffs are basically making it more expensive to build all the space stuff.
Exactly. Because a lot of those essential components, they're coming from those countries that are now facing tariffs.
Ouch.
So it creates this ripple effect. Prices go up across the board.
And who does that hurt the most?
The smaller companies.
Ah, the new space startups we were talking
Yeah,
about.
right. For the big guys, a 10% increase, they might be able to handle that.
Tighten the belts a bit.
Yeah, maybe cut back on something else. But for a small startup, that 10, 20, 25% increase,
Could be make or break.
literally,
Yeah.
that extra cost could be the difference between launching their satellite and,
Folding up shop.
sadly, yeah. The article actually calls these tariffs a tax on innovation.
That's a pretty powerful way to put it. Makes you think about the unintended consequences of these policies.
Totally. And it's not just about the immediate price hike either. There's this huge problem with delays and uncertainty.
Oh, right, because these space projects, they're not quick turnaround things.
Nope. They can take years to plan and develop.
Years. And if you suddenly don't know if you can get the components,
Or if they're going to cost way more.
or
So
if there's going to be some new export rule,
it throws everything off.
totally makes planning almost impossible.
And the article, it brings up this other thing, which is maybe even more worrisome, this idea of the global space market getting fragmented.
Fragmented.
What do they mean by that? So they're basically saying that these U.S. tariffs, they could actually end up creating separate space ecosystems.
Separate, like different countries developing their own completely independent space programs.
Kind of, yeah. Imagine if China, because of these tariffs, doubles down on building its own completely separate space infrastructure.
Their own launch site, their own GPS.
Exactly. They actually already have their own version of GPS called Beidou.
Oh, right, I've heard of that.
So they're already doing it. And imagine if they start developing their own standards for, data transmission, communication protocols, everything.
So instead of this interconnected global system, you'd have these parallel systems, each country doing its own thing.
Exactly. And that's less efficient for everyone,
Oh, yeah. More expensive, more duplication of effort.
And it could create all sorts of problems, what if your satellite needs to communicate with another one that's using a totally different system?
Yikes.
It could get messy.
And they mentioned something about countries caught in the middle, right?
Oh, yeah. That's another layer of complexity because now imagine you're a country I don't know, Brazil,
Okay.
and you need to choose, do you go with the U.S. system or the Chinese system, or try to somehow use both, which is probably a nightmare.
Talk about a tough decision.
It is, and it could even create political friction.
Right, like who you align with in space suddenly becomes a big geopolitical move.
Exactly. It's a whole can of worms, and then there's the whole issue of retaliation.
Oh, right. Other countries aren't just going to sit back and take it.
Nope, they're going to hit back with their own tariffs and barriers,
So it becomes this tit-for-tat trade war.
which could actually backfire on the U.S.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, imagine a scenario where, a European country is looking to launch a big communications satellite, right? And they're considering a U.S. company, which maybe had the best technology, but because of all these trade tensions and the uncertainty it creates, they decide to go with a European company instead.
Just to play it safe.
Exactly. So the U.S. company loses out.
Wow, it's like shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah, it's a classic example of unintended consequences.
So with all these potential downsides, what does the article suggest we do about it?
Well, they have a few key recommendations. First off, they say we need More stable trade policies when it comes to space.
Stable and predictable.
That's it. Less tariffs, more like clear rules that everyone can follow.
So companies can plan long-term without worrying about the rug being pulled out from under them.
Exactly. And they're not saying, like, ignore national security or anything.
Right, there are legitimate concerns.
Totally. But they say those concerns should be addressed with more, like, targeted measures.
Instead of just throwing tariffs at everything.
Exactly. And then they talk about this idea of international standards.
Ah, like common protocols that everyone agrees on.
Bingo. So instead of every country developing its own separate space systems.
They're all interoperable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which would be way more efficient.
Makes total sense.
And then they talk about the role of research and development.
Okay, so investing in new technologies.
Yes. But they specifically say that this should be done, like, collaboratively.
Oh, with allies?
Right.
Sharing the knowledge and the costs?
Exactly. Not just the U.S. trying to do everything on its own.
So it's like, we need to work together if we really want to unlock the potential of space.
That's the big takeaway.
So it sounds like the article is advocating for a kind of balancing act, right?
Oh, definitely. It's like protecting national interests, but also recognizing that space.
It's a global endeavor.
Exactly. And the article concludes with this really powerful point. They basically say, if we want a thriving space sector, we need a healthy global economy.
Because the two are so intertwined.
Absolutely. And they ask this question, which I think is really powerful. It's like, do we want a future where space is divided? You know, each country hoarding its own little piece of the pie.
A fragmented space race.
Or do we want a future where space is truly collaborative?
Right.
Where everyone's working together?
Space. The final frontier of global cooperation.
I like that. And that's really what this whole deep dive has been about, you know, understanding how the space sector isn't just some separate thing. It's really a reflection of what's happening here on Earth.
The economy, global politics, everything is tied together.
It's all interconnected. And as we keep pushing further into space, those connections are only going to get stronger.
It makes you wonder what other unexpected things might pop up that impact space exploration.
Right. Like some random event on the other side of the world could suddenly have huge consequences for a space mission.
It really is this delicate balance.
Totally. So, as we wrap up, it's worth considering what unforeseen event or policy change, either here on Earth or maybe even out in space. What's going to be the next big thing that shapes the future of space exploration?
And how will that impact humanity's quest to explore the cosmos?
It's something to think about.
It definitely is.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
It was a good one.
Until next time.
See ya.